So, how do you keep the world from falling apart? How do we create any kind of order when you have all these different nations, all with their own interests? That question feels more urgent today than it has in a long, long time. To even begin to answer it, we've got to understand where the whole idea of a world order even came from. So let's do that. Let's jump back about 400 years. Okay, so I want you to picture a whole continent just tearing itself to pieces. For 30 straight years, from 1618 to 1648, Central Europe was basically a giant battlefield. This wasn't just a war, it was a total meltdown of politics, religion, everything. We call it the 30 Years' War, and it was a kind of devastation nobody had ever seen before. And just to put a number on that devastation, 25%. Nearly a quarter of the entire population of Central Europe, gone, dead, not just from fighting, but from the disease and starvation that followed. The scale of the carnage is it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. So you can imagine, for the people who somehow lived through all that, this wasn't some academic question. It was the only question that mattered. After decades of nonstop bloodshed, how in the world do you build a system that can stop this from ever happening again? And out of all that rubble and chaos, something pretty radical was born. It wasn't some grand, moral, feel-good vision. It was brutally practical. It was based on a cold, hard look at the reality of a situation. The answer finally came in 1648. It was a set of treaties we now call the Peace of Westphalia. And look, this wasn't about everybody holding hands and singing together. It was a pragmatic deal. The dream of a single, unified Christian Europe was dead. No single king or emperor was strong enough to rule everyone else. So they had to agree on a whole new set of rules for how to coexist. And this right here, this was the absolute core of the whole thing, the idea of state sovereignty. What it meant was simple, but it was a game changer. Each state was now the master of its own house. The religion you chose, how you ran your country, that was your business, and everybody else had to stay out of it. So you can think of it like a new club, the Westphalian Club, and it had three main rules. First, the state is the main player now, not the church, not some sprawling empire. Second, you respect everyone else's sovereignty, mind your own business, basically. And third, and this is key, you use a balance of power to keep things in check. If any one country gets too big for its britches, the others team up to put it back in its place. This whole new way of thinking was really pushed by people like Cardinal Richelieu over in France. And this quote from him just nails it. He's saying, look, an individual person can worry about their eternal soul, but the state doesn't have an afterlife. Its survival has to be secured right here, right now. And that idea, the national interest, became the engine that drove this whole new system. So they build this new system of balance and sovereignty. But of course, it wasn't long before it faced a massive test, a test that came from one single man who wanted to just tear up the entire rulebook. And that man was, of course, Napoleon Bonaparte. He wasn't just another general trying to grab some territory. This guy was on a whole other level. He saw himself as a history-making figure, the world's soul, as one philosopher called him. His goal wasn't just to win wars, it was to create one unified European empire with him in charge, a total rejection of the Westphalian idea. So after Napoleon is finally defeated, the leaders of Europe all get together. This meeting, the Congress of Vienna, was basically the cleanup crew. Their job was to put the pieces of Europe back together and to tweak the balance of power system so that another Napoleon could never happen again. And here's the amazing part. It worked. It really, really worked. They created a system so stable that it gave Europe nearly 100 years of peace. It was incredible. The main idea became that keeping the system stable was more important than any one country's squabbles. Okay, so if it worked so well for so long, what happened? How did this remarkably stable system, this century of peace, just completely fall apart? Well, it all started with a big change in how leaders thought about the world. First, you've got the old way of thinking, represented by guys like Clemens von Metternich of Austria, the main architect of the Vienna system. For him, everyone's security was linked together. The general interest of Europe was the best protection for any one state. His philosophy was basically, we're all in this together. And then, along comes Otto von Bismarck of Prussia, and he looked at Metternich's ideas and essentially said, that's cute, but it's just romantic nonsense. For Bismarck, the only thing that mattered was power, cold, hard national self-interest, or, as he called it, egotism. Forget the general interest, it's every state for itself. And when Bismarck put that ruthless philosophy into action and unified Germany in 1871, he completely broke the old system. Suddenly, you have this new, super powerful country right in the heart of Europe, a country that could beat any of its neighbors one-on-one. The old, delicate balance was gone. And you can really see the change here. In the 1800s, alliances were flexible, they were fluid, countries made partnerships to deal with immediate problems, but by the early 1900s, all that flexibility was gone. Europe had hardened into two giant, armed camps. These weren't temporary alliances anymore. They were permanent blocs getting ready for an all-out war. And this is the terrifying result of that rigidity. When a crisis hits in the summer of 1914 with the assassination of an archduke, it sets off an unstoppable chain reaction. The whole system was locked in, on autopilot, heading straight off a cliff. Look how fast it happens. A local crisis becomes a world war in just about a month. And just like that, the Vienna Order, the thing that had kept the peace for 100 years, was completely destroyed. It was consumed by the very nationalism and rivalries it was designed to hold back. The great unraveling was complete. But here is where the story takes a really fascinating, ironic twist. Just as this Westphalian system is dying in Europe, where it was born, its core ideas start spreading and taking over the entire planet. Think about it. In the 20th century, as all these European empires started to crumble, what was the argument the colonized people used to demand their freedom? They used the language of Westphalia. They demanded state sovereignty, national independence, and non-interference. The very tools of the European system became the best weapons to use against it. Which brings us to today. And that 400-year-old system is getting hit from all sides. In Europe, they're experimenting with giving up some sovereignty to the EU. And in the Middle East, you have groups who want to tear down state borders entirely. In Asia, old rivalries are bubbling up between powerful nations. In the United States, well, it's always had a complicated relationship with the system, sometimes acting as its biggest defender, and other times, its biggest critic. So that really is the central question for us right now. The system that has basically structured our world for 4 centuries is under more strain than ever. And order doesn't just happen. You have to build it. You have to maintain it. But in a world this divided, with so many different cultures and histories, can we actually agree on a common set of rules? Can we shape all that diversity into some kind of peaceful order? That's the mystery we all have to solve.